It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we're talking for the first time on this show about one of Glenn's stage performances in the Tony-winning Broadway musical Sunset Boulevard.
Time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today is a film critic, writer, podcaster extraordinaire. He's joined me on every episode of my Patreon bonus series, How Did They Win? Writer, podcaster at Next Best Picture, and member of the Writers Guild of America, Gallica, and the Television Academy. Look at his credentials. Welcome to the show, Tom O'Brien.
Hi, everybody.
So glad to have you on the show, Tom. I've missed podcasting with you.
So happy to be back to talk about Glenny.
Yes, my favorite subject. But actually, before we talk Sunset Boulevard, tell me your relationship with Glenn Close overall. And if you remember when you first saw her, you were telling me offline when you first saw her, so I'd love to hear more of that story. And if you have a favorite performance of hers all these years later.
Well, I know most folks first was introduced to Glenn in 1982 with The World According to Garp. And that was like such a spectacular film debut, which I know you've gone into in detail. Mm-hmm. But I actually got to know her a couple of years beforehand on Broadway. She was a young working actress. And she landed a supporting role in a big musical that season called Barnum. Mm-hmm. It was all about P.T. Barnum. It's not The Greatest Showman. This is a totally different musical than that. And she played P.T. Barnum's wife, Charity. The show isn't very good, but it's one of those kind of fun music hall kind of things where everybody did a little bit of everything. The star of the show, Jim Dale, came from the British music hall tradition, and it was one of those shows in which the star does everything. I mean, he sang, he danced, he walked on a tightrope. He unicycled around the stage. It was one of those things and it was a miracle that anybody else could be noticed in it. But as Barnum's wife, Charity, there was this young ingenue type, and I found myself drawn to her because this was not the normal wifey kind of actress. She was someone who kind of radiated intelligence in the midst of all of this nonsense going on around him. But I was so drawn to her because by being drawn to her, it allowed me to see what Barnum saw in her. And she was sort of this oasis of calm in the midst of all this chaos. And it was Glenn. And she got her first Tony nomination for it. And that was one of those nominations I was happiest with that year, because they saw what I saw, and it was really, really great to see her. And she'd been kicking around a little bit, but not too much. She was still, I think, in her early 30s at that time. And it was just, someone to keep an eye on. And then Garp came along. But then the second time I saw her on stage was before the big chills, in that time period when she was doing the campaign for Garp, that January of 1983. And she opened up on Broadway in a play called The Real Thing by Tom Stoppard. And her co-star in that play was her Reversal of Fortune co-star, Jeremy Irons.
And the House of the Spirits co-star, let's not forget.
True.
Got to throw that in there.
I can see why they click together. I mean,
Yeah.
to be able to, the sparks they elicit on stage were replicated in those films as well.
Hmm.
And she was just electric in it. She was dynamic, she was sexy, and it was quite a different character than the one I had seen in Barnum. And so like, man, this woman can do anything. And for this, she won her first Tony Award,
Yep.
deservedly so, as did Jeremy Irons. It's a very complicated, multi-layered Tom Stoppard play in which people take on different roles and different parts and all of it. But she was great. And just as a side note, I mean, talk about a starry cast or starry to be cast. Two of the key supporting players in this show they were Cynthia Nixon and Christine Baranski together, and
Amazing.
amazing before the Gilded Age. And for her performance, Baranski won her first Tony Award too. So this was quite the show in
Hmm.
1983. God, I'm dating myself, but hey,
If I could turn back time and see that show, oh my God.
but such nice memories. It'd be
Yeah.
great. Uh, I had not seen Glenn's second Tony win, a play called Death and the Maiden. But then the announcement came that she was going to do Sunset Boulevard,
Hmm.
which was planning to open in London with Patti LuPone. The big news and exciting news for me, having relocated to Los Angeles by that time, was that there was going to be a pre-Broadway tryout in Los Angeles at the now unfortunately demolished Schubert Theater in Sensory City, which is a big barn of a theater, and it was new and it was great, and they tore it down to make some, I think, a talent agency building or something. But nonetheless, to be able to see her in our little hometown or big hometown was quite wonderful. And
Mm.
so the idea of adding her stage work in Sunset to The World According to Glenn
Yeah.
is been a great opportunity. And thank you for extending the boundaries of The World According to Glenn to
Well, of
include.
course. I mean, it's such an iconic moment in her career where she got to show more of her range. She had barely even shown her musical stylings before. Like I had mentioned before, like if people by chance had seen Barnum, such as you, that was before she was even in a film. She did Maxie, which not many people saw, and she got to sing in that, but, she did like a little bit of singing on SNL, but who knows how
Yes.
many people saw that. So this was a big, big moment for her. I am curious, though, if you did have a favorite performance before we move too much into this in her career, film, television, theater, anything. What's been the one that stuck out for you?
Well, the one I keep coming back to, amidst all of the very likable performances she's given. I'm always up for another rewatch of The Big Chill. Fatal Attraction is always just a hoot to watch. But I think the performance that's stayed with me is still Dangerous Liaisons, because what she showed in that was far beyond. It to me is like, if anyone asks me what's an example of a great performance that is great because of restraint, it's that one.
Yeah.
What she holds back draws us closer, and that is just the brilliance of what she does here, and I can see that any day. Just want to be able to kind of revel in just it's to me one of the great screen performances of the 80s. Forget the Academy, it really is by far the best, I think, that year. And
Yep.
it just is, to me, stood the test of time.
It certainly has. I agree. And, I had so much fun talking about that movie on the show already with Sophia Simonello. I think this is
Oh, great.
one of those films that I could talk to anyone about. And I feel like we would have so many different angles to talk about her performance and people getting different things out of it. But yeah, the restraint is key. She's such an intelligent actress.
God.
And so, yeah, I think with that, we have a lot to get to. So let's just jump right in if you're ready.
All right. Now I had seen
Okay.
the Los Angeles version
Yes.
of this,
Very
and
exciting.
And now I can share that with you because I know that you have seen a bit of the New York version. In fact, the entire New York version yourself.
Yes, not on the stage itself watching as an actual musical, but watching it from the New York Public Library several years later. So, like I said, it's a big one. This is a landmark moment in Glenn's career, and this is where, like you kind of were suggesting, we get to talk more about Glenn as a stage performer. So she had Barnum, like you said, got her first Tony nomination. Also worth noting, in 1982, the same year she made her debut in film, she was in The Singular Life of Albert Nobbs, which would later be adapted, of course, into Albert Nobbs. Decades later, she won her first Tony for The Real Thing, like you said. She won her second for Death and the Maiden, both plays, and most people were used to seeing her as pretty much just a dramatic actress, not really displaying her singing voice or her musical talents very much. But this opportunity came about for her because of her connection to Christopher Hampton, the writer of Dangerous Liaisons, who had called her while she was filming House of the Spirits and asked if she wanted to be Norma in the Los Angeles production of Sunset Boulevard. And so this is where we can kind of back up a little and note that Sunset was developed by Andrew Lloyd Webber with lyrics from Christopher Hampton and Don Black. It's an adaptation of the classic 1950 film starring Gloria Swanson, one of the best films of all time, in my estimation. And there had been plans to adapt it to the stage for a while, even with Gloria Swanson wanting to do it herself for a while in the wake of the film's success, but the plans there fell through. Stephen Sondheim wanted to make it in the 60s. That fell through when Billy Wilder basically was like, you have to make it an opera or it's not happening. And so it didn't happen. And then Andrew Lloyd Webber expressed interest as early as the 70s, but got distracted a bit by other work for a while until he revisited this idea in the late 80s and early 90s. And the first version was at the Sindmonton Festival with Rhea Jones as Norma, but the official premiere was in London, starring Patti LuPone as Norma, which got some mixed reviews, we could say, but it had enough buzz that a Los Angeles production was mounted, and Andrew Lloyd Webber did not allow Patti LuPone to carry over her performance to America, despite what she claims was part of their agreement to do so. We will revisit some of that later. Don't want to get into it all right away, but suffice to say, she was pissed. But Glenn got involved because of Hampton's influence, and she was so honored to be offered the part. She said at the time, Norma Desmond is one of the great tragic creations. You're lucky in your lifetime if you get to play a character like her. So she did that in late 1993, which was a huge success, and then she transferred over to Broadway and was an even bigger success. So with all that, to quickly just introduce the musical itself, most people know this already, but in case people don't, Sunset Boulevard is a very faithful adaptation of the 1950 film, which tells the story of a jaded screenwriter named Joe Gillis, who is on the run from creditors and happens to drive down Sunset Boulevard and pull into the driveway of Norma Desmond, who was once one of the greatest Hollywood stars during the silent era, but she never made the transition to talkies, and she's since been rejected by Hollywood and lives in her mansion with her butler, Max. So she soon falls in love with Joe and hopes she can use his writing skills to help launch her return to the big screen in the form of Salome, a big vanity project she's written for herself. But things take a dark turn as Norma's loneliness and her fear of rejection causes her to, let's just say, lash out in dangerous ways. So yes, let's fully dive in here, Tom. Again, I was so delighted to hear that you had those memories of seeing this production back in Los Angeles in '93. So the floor is yours. Tell me your thoughts on this production and your thoughts, most importantly, on Glenn's performance.
Well, unlike the most recent revival of Sunset Boulevard a year or two ago, which is basically a bare stage and a lot of lights and video screens, this was a lavish production, to say the least, a gargantuan production, to say the least. I mean, this is the kind of Broadway show that Broadway really can't afford to do anymore and really couldn't afford to do back then. But the material kind of called for it, at least the Andrew Lloyd Webber's vision of it and director Trevor Nunn's. It has enormous set design just to begin with. The setting to her mansion is just it is as gothic as it comes. It's just this side of the Addams family. It's so gloomy and enveloping and the like. And there was just to give you an idea just how heavy this was. The set that John Napier had designed for it weighed 17 tons. Let that
Unbelievable. I
sink
know.
in.
Right.
It was, and its design was, in a way, there were it used, however, some modern technological uh, elements to it, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But the operatic nature of the material and the enormity of the sets, this show would have flopped flat on its face if you did not have a star in that central role who could command the spotlight against all of that.
Right.
And that's where Glenn Close came in. And the reviews in Los Angeles were as mixed on the show as they were in London. But the big difference was Close got personal raves in a way that LuPone didn't in London. Because in a way, it was such a surprise for a lot of audiences. You know, we had heard her singing voice, but this is a difficult score. You know, with a lot of variations and tonal changes and the like. And to think that an actress we associate with dramatic parts largely would be able to do this was a surprise in the industry. The other leg up that Close had over, say, Patti LuPone was that Glenn Close came to the project already a movie star,
Bingo.
whereas many of the other actresses who've taken on that part have not been.
Yep.
And she brought a built-in credibility to her presence there. She knew how a movie star behaved and pushed it to the extreme. So we walk in seeing when she makes her first entrance, we see this is a movie star, a aging, decrepit movie star, but nonetheless, she still has that aura about her. And not every actor can bring that, and Close did to the nth degree. But what kind of struck me about how she held the stage, even in quiet moments, against this huge backdrop. She's one of those musical actors who acts through music. It's not like I'm giving a performance and then stopping to sing a song. The performance continues and grows, and she uses the song to enhance that. Just one song I'd like to single out, As If We Never Said Goodbye. This is one of the most famous songs in the show, and it's one of the most famous moments in the Billy Wilder film when Norma, under the delusion that she's being brought back for her big comeback and is going to be the star that she's always been, comes to Paramount Pictures, and she is acknowledged, but not under the way that she wanted to be. And she begins the song, I don't know why I'm frightened. And Close genuinely looks frightened, and there's a little tremble in the voice.
Yeah.
And you really sympathize for Norma. It's like, has she bitten off more than she can chew? Is she seeing the truth finally? And it continues for a few bars like that. And then she sees some crew members who knew her from the good old days and who treat her with the devotion that she was accustomed to. And as soon as she sees that, her voice gets stronger and stronger, and you can see Norma Desmond take over. And it just kind of grows and grows. About two-thirds of the way through the song, she has a moment of self-doubt. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And then she just digs deep and finishes the song. We showed the world new ways to dream. And she is just empowered. And It is just a gorgeous high and low. It's a character arc within one song, and it's all her. And that was just what, for me, was the jaw-dropping moment in a number of really awestruck moments that she
Hmm.
delivers on the stage. Now, you've seen that clip, Kevin, I believe.
Oh, yes. Yes. And I've seen that. I've seen it in the context now, of course, of the show itself. Yeah, just the way she modulates that in terms of the softness and the sort of trepidation of her approaching it, and then slowly building the confidence and just belting it out for the world to hear her. It's gorgeous. And for her to do that night after night, it's just astonishing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll say for me, I mean, first of all, I adore the movie. Like I said, one of my favorite movies ever. Gloria Swanson, icon, icon, icon. And I love just how cynical and kind of like confrontational it is about how ruthless Hollywood is, especially to older women. And there is just something kind of hypnotic about Billy Wilder's direction, and I always get swept up in it. It's like this sort of nightmare that you want to look away from, but that also it's kind of like daring you to really look at it, I guess. So I love it. And the musical, is something I, again, had never experienced live and still haven't experienced live, but I had certainly watched clips of Glenn performing with one look and As If We Never Said Goodbye many times, her two big numbers in the musical. So I think just from watching those clips, I really understood what this performance would be. Just the melodrama and the heartache and the vulnerability. It's so striking. But I had never seen all of that in the full context until this past week when I trekked over to the New York Public Library, which has a pro shot of Sunset Boulevard from 1994. And yeah, watched it in full at the library. This was a big, big event for me. And so, anyway, after finally watching it, I do sort of see why some of the critics were mixed on the show itself, just in the sense that, like, it is a lot of style and maybe not as much substance compared to the movie. That, like, it's worth it to see the leading lady star, of course.
Yeah.
But as an overall presentation, it is a bit lacking in terms of like the overall songs outside of Norma's big solos. I don't know if that's how you feel as well, but just some of like the jazzier kind of like the contrast of the current Hollywood studio system stuff that's outside of Norma's mansion, I'm not really as much a fan of.
So many of those scenes seem to me filler. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, Glenn is changing backstage, so we have to do something up front.
pretty much. This is just like the chorus kind of just like doing their thing and then,
Yeah, yeah.
waiting for Norma.
I think for me, the problem with the book is that it has taken the bite out of the story.
Mm,
That dark cynicism that really gives the movie that grit and that power isn't
right.
really here.
Hmm.
It's they lean a little bit more into the, I don't want to say horror movie kind of elements to it. It's dark and shadowy. I mean, there's moments when Glenn is directed to lead into that as well. I mean, there are moments
Yeah.
when she's hunched over and she's got her turban and her claws onto Joe Gillis that kind of feel almost vampiric at times.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's a choice, but it's not what gave the movie its strength. And I think the musical suffers a bit by that.
I'd say so.
I think this production also may have been hindered by Alan Campbell. He's a pretty boy, but
Hmm.
he can't he doesn't have the acting chops to stand up to Glenn Close.
Yeah. And he's no William Holden.
He's no William Holden, no.
So,
and
yeah.
and I have to say too, he's no Tom Francis, the guy who played Joe Gillis in the recent revival. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a sexy swath of a man who could go toe to toe with Norma.
Right.
Alan Campbell, not so much. And that imbalance there, you lose that fight among equals that Holden and Swanson brought to the movie. So I think
Right.
that really harms the show as well. That being said, I do want to give some flowers to George Hearn, who
Hmm.
played when I saw it, played the role of Max. Hearn is a Broadway veteran, and really nailed this part. First of all, he looks exactly like Eric von Stroheim with his hair
Yeah.
shaved like that. It's a head shave.
Hmm.
And you see Norma's past in him, and it's a very, very haunting performance. As if the rest of the company was up to those two, then we would be talking about a different show. But at least that initial production, I think, had those weak links about it that kind of kept it from achieving what it could have been.
Yeah, that's how I felt as well watching it. And to finally see Glenn in all her glory in its entirety, I can't say I was surprised necessarily because I had seen the clip so many times. I kind of got what the performance would be, but just all the connective tissue, sort of like you were saying, in terms of the way that she transitions from speaking to song and making that seem so kind of melodic in its own way. I think it's so gorgeous and so smart. It's stunning work from her, and you would never know that she wasn't a major musical Broadway star. She is just that confident in herself. She just owns the stage. Even just watching it on a screen, I could see her totally connecting
Yeah.
with the crowd.
Oh,
And also, but also at the same time, showing how Norma is kind of off in her own world and kind of like hopelessly in love and romanticizing the idea of her return and of being with Joe, but like none of that is going to be a reality for her, and her ignorance is kind of what keeps her going
yeah.
ultimately. But like when she gets those little cracks of reality, I find it really disturbing, honestly, to watch, just to see her just fully unable to accept it, you know?
Yeah.
On the whole, I think it is structured in a way that really highlights Norma first and foremost, and the sort of gothic scenery of her mansion is carried over very impressively from the film, and her costumes. Anthony Powell, her frequent collaborator, designing for that character, just incredible. The robes, the turbans, it's all just, the presentation is stunning work. I just wish it were more well-rounded in terms of, like you said, giving it more bite like the movie had. And maybe even, I don't know if this would be like too far afield of what people would want, but maybe updating it a little bit for 1993 or 4 in terms of like just making the feel of it resonate a little bit more for that audience, I suppose.
Yes.
And make it as shocking as it must have been in 1950 for that audience.
Yes. That's a really good point about it not being shocking. It
Yeah.
seems it plays more nostalgically than shocking. And that's fine as far as it goes. This is very much a prop heavy, costume heavy kind of musical in which there's a lot of things on stage. But the role, I think, requires someone who can command attention. And the fact that Glenn has that ability to hold an audience rapt really helped in bringing the character of Norma forth, because Norma had the same quality. And that quality made her a star. If the actress playing her does not have that same can't look away feeling about her, then the show doesn't work. And that's why they were so fortunate to get her. She's not a Broadway belter like I imagine Patti LuPone, attacked the role that way. You don't say, "Wow, what a voice!" The voice is good. Glenn's voice is superbly matched to the material. But when we're talking about the dramatic singing, it's not about the power, the loudness of the dramatic singing. It's in some way at times using the quiet of the dramatic singing to be able to really fully reveal more about the character.
And I would say that her imperfections as a singer are very appropriate given what the character is,
Yes.
and lend it some desperation in a way, and vulnerability, and just that like urgency that she has. I think that's all perfect for this character. It's kind of like what people say about people love Liza Minnelli in Cabaret, but like everyone always says she was such a great singer in that, and that's not really what the stage show should be. Like she's not
Yes,
supposed to
yeah,
be like
yeah,
that kind of a singer. That's kind of how I feel watching this, is that maybe she's not technically the most precise,
yeah.
but that's part of the character,
Yes,
I
yeah. It,
suppose.
it works toward us understanding her delusions.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so she plays an actress who happens to be singing and acting through song. And
There you go.
that's a key quality that this particular production had. I know it sounds like I've been knocking the sets, but there is sort of a coup de theatre that was almost cinematic that I did want to mention,
Yep.
because there's a scene about halfway, two-thirds through, in which Joe does not want to spend New Year's Eve with Norma. And Norma's pleading and begging him to do it. And no, he's going to go off with his Hollywood friends and party. And Norma is emoting like crazy. And suddenly, all of a sudden, the set on which she is on raises up, and Norma's continuing to emote, but she's reaching the very top of the proscenium. And then below the stage comes a whole new set out with the party that Joe is attending. And that was a gasp moment for me because Glenn doesn't break character at all. I mean, when that party scene is over, she is back on that staircase and just emoting like crazy. And then the party scene recedes, her scene comes down, and it's a moment, a gasp-inducing moment in terms of Broadway staging that I thought was really, it really helped. It drew attention to itself, but it really helped the actors, and it helped particularly, I think, Glenn when she comes back. There's the moment when they kind of reunite that it sort of, had we ever lost sight of her in terms of the party, it would not have landed quite the same. And it's just really a top moment in an otherwise okay show.
Yeah, I felt the same way watching it, and I had not been prepared for that, so I didn't even know that was happening. And I was like, "Oh, that is a cool choice." It was a little bit like the Andrew Lloyd Webber, like dropping the chandelier from Phantom. That was
Yes.
kind
Yeah.
of an
Yeah.
equivalent moment.
Yeah. And people did
Yeah,
talk about it.
yeah, yeah. But the contrast there, the lighting is really on point in that moment because the mansion is so dark and just like a few red lights here and there, but it's just so bleak looking. And then just the brightness and the loudness of the other party, back where everyone is social and having a great time. It's very striking.
Yeah.
And yeah, that scene, of course, Norma's just spiraling, and it's an interesting way to head into Act Two. I don't think it's the most compelling outside of just the split screen that we're seeing in that moment.
No, because
But
the party is fairly dull.
yeah, this is no defying gravity
No, it's not.
heading into the intermission per se, but it is just dramatically speaking what she does in terms of like getting into the drama of like trying to use reverse psychology even on Joe when Max has called Joe over and that Norma has attempted suicide, that she's cut her wrists, and him rushing over. And just like the way that she acts in that moment reminded me so much of Alex Forrest in
Yes.
Fatal Attraction. There is so much overlap there in those moments that it's just like, this is why she was such great casting for this, because she can tap into that kind of desperation and the sadness, but also the slight manipulation tactics too at the same time, and make that all seem like it's all kind of flowing, like the multi-layers there. It's genuinely impressive.
And in 1993, Alex Forrest was much more present in our mind.
Top of mind.
Fatal Attraction
Yeah.
had only been about 6 years before that, and
Right.
that jumped her to a level of superstardom that became a household name, and everybody knew. If they hadn't seen Fatal Attraction, they knew the clips from it. They knew that there is that side of Glenn Close all of a sudden. And when in those scenes, Kevin, that you point out, that's exactly what came to mind. And it's interesting that it came to mind to you too, so many
Oh, yeah.
years later.
Well, it helps to be doing a show
Well,
that's
that's true.
tracking
That's
her
right.
career
It is.
chronologically. But yes, yeah, the energy of I'm not going to be ignored, Dan, is
Yes.
very much there in those moments. But before we get too further into like Act Two and sort of the ending of it all, I did just want to highlight With One Look, her other big musical moment in the show. I love the way Glenn performs that, not only on a vocal level, but her gestures, the way she kind of like closes her eyes and just totally is channeling the silent star that she once was,
Yeah.
as if Joe isn't even there and is like lost in her own world. And I love also when she gestures with her hands at her face
Yes.
and kind of smiles to herself when she sings With One Look, I'm the girl next door. And just like the way she kind of has that girlish tone and widens her eyes.
Yes.
It's like this kind of uncanny effect, just like fully channeling that style. And just even the same way she's like, or the love that you hunger for. The emphasis she puts on that love is very like old fashioned melodrama kind of thing. It's just such a well written, almost quasi like I want number almost for her, where, you know, she's talking about where she's been, but also like where she could still be again, I suppose.
Yeah. All it takes is that one look. And that's a great example, Kevin, of what we had talked about before in terms of using the songs to deepen the characters. You learned so much about Norma in that song, and those gestures have a lot to do with it because you can see that she can see the star that she once was, and to her mind would still be again.
Yeah. And I think what she's communicating there, I mean, it's true in the film too, but just the idea of like how she could just like a change in her expression can communicate this universal truth. And it's sort of also implying within that today's movies that have dialogue are almost cheaper or like less truthful compared to what she was at her peak.
Yes.
Which, you know, a lot of stars in the silent era really believed. And you know, I guess it's kind of true of every evolution of film, really, that feeling of like the quality of the essential artistry is kind of being diluted by new technology and these changes.
Yes.
You know, maybe today's version, we could say the use of AI, even though that's a whole other issue of robots and taking the jobs of humans. So, you know, people are right to express concern about that, obviously. But there is a kind of pride that a lot of artists take of feeling like who they were and what the business was like in their prime was maybe how things should be forever. But also time moves forward and it's really hard to adapt. And especially if you're a woman in Hollywood who's been rejected by the same industry that you were once a major asset for, it can genuinely feel like betrayal. And you kind of like want that attention again, but you're also resentful of it at the same time. Again, you need an actress like Glenn Close who can kind of communicate the desire and the desperation, but also the bitterness and the anger and the resentment within that all at once.
Norma's pissed.
She's pissed.
In her mind, she has a right to be. But
yeah,
and it was as true back then as it is now. She plays Norma very much as Norma being in the great actors don't need words to say school of acting. And in With One Look, she demonstrates that. It's a wonderful bravura piece of acting through song, once again. You know, and it's those two songs that are living on today because of it.
Exactly. And just like she has in As If We Never Said Goodbye, the way she modulates up to that triumphant moment in this song too, where it enters a new key and she's like, with one look, I'll ignite a blaze. I'll return to my glory days. You know, they'll say Norma's back at last. And then the key line, of course, is with one look, I'll be me, which is so interesting because it's like, if I don't have my beautiful, youthful face, if I don't have the spotlight and the adoration of the fans and the job and the craft of acting, then what am I? I'm nothing.
Oh. Yeah.
It's such a great piece of writing.
Yeah, it is. It is such a standout from the other elements of the show. And it's
Yeah.
worth sitting through a lot of the rest of the show just to get to those moments. Yeah,
Yeah, I will ultimately agree. I wish I could defend it a little more, but I mean, I
I
like
know.
one song I like in Act One is "The Perfect Year,"
Yeah.
which is the duet between Norma and Joe at New Year's Eve. It's really the only duet that's also featuring Joe that I like very much. It's just
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
mostly what Norma's giving there and just the vulnerability of being like, again, it's like that romanticism of just being like, the new year, like what the new year can be for people is like the idea of new hope and possibility and that sort of optimism. And it's so heartbreaking, obviously, knowing where Norma is going into Act Two. It's just like you have such high hopes, and yet your expectations are not matching your reality almost in any way,
That's right.
either in your personal life, your professional life, anything.
And it adds
And
adds an extra poignancy because most of us know where Norma's going to wind up, you
yeah,
know. And
exactly.
to see that kind of hopefulness that it's eventually going to be dashed,
Yeah.
close plays it to perfection in that scene. That is a good number.
Yeah. And then, but a few lines I wrote down from after that song is when, of course, Joe is like, "So when are the other guests coming?" And the way Glenn is just like, "There are no other guests." It's so funny. She does have a few good funny lines just in terms of her like such delusional kind of enthusiasm. After that, she's like, "I'm in love with you. Surely you know that." It's just, again, like the theatricality there is like, it's funny, but it's also heartbreaking at the same time. It's really remarkable what she does. Do you want to talk at all about Joe's big sort of solo number in Act Two, the title song, Sunset Boulevard? Because I know that was a big part of the new revival, which is
Yeah,
filmed much more creatively, but this is just not
it's
really.
it's a stand and sing song.
Yeah,
And there's the initial, oh, here comes the title song. And it's well sung, but it's sung as an observer. It's like Joe is
right.
commenting on other things, and so I feel two or three steps removed from it. And the fact that there's not a whole lot of personality there didn't
Yeah.
didn't really help things. Whereas we may talk about it later, the revival,
Hmm.
that particular song is one of the major highlights of it because of the direction and the performance of how that was done there.
Yeah.
There's as except for As If We Never Said Goodbye, Act Two has a lot of reprises in it of Act One songs.
Hmm.
Almost too many, but they do serve a purpose, I think, in that
Yeah.
in Act Two they're sung in sometimes a slightly different context. It's after the Paramount visit, and some of the delusions are shattered a bit as she's on the road to madness. So the reprises work in that way, though I think most of the second act, I think, is largely book based except for those
Yeah.
reprises.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think the reprises in the finale moment of Norma are where it's most effective, which I'll get to later when she's kind of cycling through all of her various phrases throughout the musical, which really kind of emphasizes her going downhill. But yeah, I did also want to, of course, revisit and give my own thoughts on As If We Never Said Goodbye, just briefly. Just some of the other nice touches I
Yeah.
noticed in that is the moment before that where the lighting guy, Hawkeye, spots her, this old vet who had been in the business for like 30, 40 years, knows her, recognizes her, and I think she sort of recognizes him, but just the moment where he's like, "Let's get a good look at you," and shines the spotlight on her, the way that the orchestra just swells in that moment, I find very moving personally. I think it's a stunning moment, and just the way that she kind of lights up and is just like taking it all in. Gorgeous.
As I recall, it was perfectly timed, and he kind of moves the spotlight through the studio, and when the song
Yeah,
starts, that's exactly when you see her. And it's,
exactly.
it's that startling moment, but so it's both music of audio, at least through your ears, then through your eyes. It really just like, okay, this is the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, it really connects. And the instrumental there goes on for quite a few bars as she's kind of drinking it all in.
Yeah, yeah.
And this, just the way she finally drums up the courage to sing about all her old memories of being a star in those days. And, I think she's looking back with rose colored glasses, to be honest,
Yes.
because I'm sure it wasn't easy for her. But, like, just the way she's kind of like wistfully singing of the whispered conversations and overcrowded hallways and the early morning madness and the magic in the making. I mean, it goes back to like the old school sort of romanticism that Norma has about the magic of it all and her sadness that that magic is no longer there, and how hard that is to reconcile.
When
So,
when she sings the early morning madness, the way she delivers that line, I can
yeah,
picture a start day at the beginning of a studio, at the beginning of a shoot. And
right.
it's all in her line readings. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. And I love, of course, the moment towards the bridge as she builds and builds and it's being like, I don't want to be alone. That's all in the past. This world's waited long enough. I've come home at last. And just that triumphant moment as
Yeah.
she's, raising her arms up towards everyone. It's such a triumphant moment that's literally just being like, here I am, world. I'm back and I'm ready to reclaim my old glory again. And I know you missed me. I missed you too. But it's like, here I am. I'm finally back. You're welcome.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. But it's, of course, the added layer of like the reality is the system still doesn't want her. They just want her old car,
That's right. It sounds,
you know?
yeah. And at that moment, your heart just breaks for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, also within that song too, just one other line because I just love this the way she performs all of this, the way she kind of like ponders to herself and is like, "Has there ever been a moment with so much to live
Yeah.
for?"
Yes. There's an
And
extra
then
beat in there that
yes,
emphasizes live.
yes, exactly. But the way she even says "for" in that
Yeah,
moment,
that's
as
good.
she kind of looks around, there's like that shred of doubt starts to creep in again, and
Yes.
the insecurity of what the business has done to her. That feeling of like, oh, maybe do they want me? Do they want me back? I think it's one of the best moments
Yeah.
in her performance.
Oh, yeah.
And just the way the audience applauds and like the other people on stage applaud for her. I mean, that's where the meta layer, I think, of the audience watching and the sort of crowd, of course, on stage
Hmm.
melds together.
Yeah.
It's just this appreciation moment. And I like, there's that also in the With One Look where they're applauding at the end of that song too. And then when the applause dies down, she kind of like looks around and snaps out of her trance in a way. I love those meta moments.
And it helps. I mean, and it's also the quality of the song. I think
Yeah, for sure.
those are two of the best songs I think Weber's ever written.
Hmm.
And the fact that they are both delivered so expressively, I think helps to have cemented their reputations as great theater songs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just a shame about the rest of the score.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
It was
I think,
indicative of, I think, Lloyd Webber's career around that time. It's like it
mhm,
was post Phantom. Aspects of Love didn't work out. He's kind of coasting along. He's got these two great song anchoring each act. Unfortunately, the music, the entries around it aren't really up to the same quality.
yeah. Because, I mean, as we get towards the end of the musical, like, we get quite a few Joe and Betty scenes. They do their girl meets boy stuff, which is like, it's well sung, but I don't care.
No.
I do not care. Like, I think even the movie does that better, and that's even not my favorite part of that movie by any means. But like, just I don't know, it just really falls flat for me.
Yeah.
I think this production I was watching had Alice Ripley though as Betty,
Yes.
so future Tony-winning star of Next to Normal. But yeah, there's really no spark there. Even
No.
sorry to Alan Campbell, but
Yeah. And my production had Judy Kuhn.
yes,
And also another Broadway that became a Broadway real star there. Yeah,
Yeah,
if we cared more about the way we care about Holden in the film, yeah, our ties to his Joe carry over in those Betty scenes. And so it's like it's tolerable because I care what happens to Joe in these, and I didn't
exactly.
particularly care here largely because I had nothing invested in either of them.
Yeah, it's a shame
Yeah.
because it's like it's from the perspective of Joe, so
Yes.
it's kind of rough that our entry into the world just isn't really of interest, to be honest. Maybe it's just a casting thing. I don't know. Like you said, Tom Francis seems to have improved upon it recently.
Yeah.
But the ending I think is great. I do think it is, just dramatically speaking, the horror gothic of it all I think really comes into play there with the mansion.
Yeah.
Also, when I was watching it, this was just a random aside I took note of, but when Betty comes to the house after Norma has called Betty and revealed everything about Joe's whole arrangement with her, I noticed, just at least in the way it was filmed, this beautiful bust of Glenn Close as Norma Desmond on her staircase. And I was like, I would really like that for myself, actually, for my own personal collection. Like, is that being auctioned off anywhere? Who
Yeah.
has that? But
Why isn't that at the Broadway flea market? Come on, I want to.
for real, though, for
Yes.
real. But yeah, obviously, Betty goes away. She's scared off by all this. And just in those scenes, dramatically, Glenn is so good because she's kind of laughing to herself and being like, I won. Like she kind of
Yeah.
childishly laughs to herself, like, I finally have Joe to myself.
Yes. Yep.
But that's where Joe drops the bomb, of course, which is that Paramount only wanted her for her car and that her fan mail was all written by Max, her butler. And it's like sort of doubling down when Joe has held these feelings, but now she's gone too far, that, she's driven Betty away. She's not letting Joe leave. He's basically a captive and he wants to really hit her where it hurts. And just hearing that and taking it all in from Norma's perspective, she's so, just the way she reacts and communicates, that like flicker in her eyes of just how much she's screwed up maybe, and like she knows now that the industry has fully rejected her and that Joe has rejected her, that there are no fans out there probably. It's a really humbling, kind of like startling moment of her and not being able to face that, which is what makes her ultimately snap, of course.
And by that time, we're so invested in her that we feel all of that shattering in her mind, the things that she's built up, and
Yeah.
it just hits us even harder because Close has done so much work to invest us in her that it really is a powerful moment that really works on stage.
Yeah. And the way she really milks that line where she's like, I am the greatest star of them all. Delicious. Delicious, delicious. And yeah, getting the gun and being like, no one ever leaves a star, and shoots him dead. I think we get a little watery effect, like blue lighting there.
Yeah.
Nothing too fancy, but they tried.
It gets the point across.
Yeah, but of course, we're all kind of waiting as an audience for the final iconic moments from the film, where she says many of her famous lines. And just seeing her in that huge frock and just the headpiece in that final moment is really, really incredible. Kind of rambling to herself as she's walking down the stairway. She's kind of growling, she's singing. It's like just so untethered from reality. And that's the point where she starts to cycle through some of those other lines of being like, I don't know why I'm frightened.
Yeah.
And, mad about the boy, and just saying all these things that she said before. They'll say Norma's back at last. She kisses his mouth, and just it's like really kind of rambling at that point.
Yeah.
And I think the musical makes a good choice to just have that be her kind of a cappella, I think. Like there's no music behind that.
As I recall, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which really makes us even more disturbed, I think, watching her. Because she is so... Well, actually, I think her repeating those themes again is kind of relevant because she is so stuck in the past. Like, she is not moving forward. So she's just repeating what is in her mind already.
And I think
Yeah.
it's using those musical cues is a way that I think the show is able to have the same kind of powerful ending as the movie, but
Yeah.
in terms of a score, a musical score, getting the points across the way that visuals did for DeMille.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
You wind up leaving. I wound up leaving the theater through those last moments with clothes. I was like, wow. And then after you're walking up the aisle, I said, but the rest of it isn't very good. But you're just sucked over by what she's done in those last scenes.
yeah. I mean, this is a part where I was at the library, like writing down every single line and observation.
I
I
can
was just
see
like
you doing
furiously
that.
taking notes. It was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Just the way she's like, Max, where am I? And I think musically, one of my favorite parts of that scene is when Max tells her they're all waiting for her,
Yeah.
that, you know, and she sings to that dark melody that we hear at the beginning in the orchestra of being like, of course, now I remember. I love that melody.
Yeah.
Just the eeriness and the evocative quality of that. I wish that the musical had a little bit more of that
Yeah.
evocative energy at times, but yeah, the way she walks down the stairs, gasping and crying, so overwhelmed with emotion. This is where I think there are glimpses in here that I actually prefer to what Gloria Swanson did, quite honestly. I think the way she delivers a few of those ending lines, where there's one line where she's like, I can't go on with the scene. I'm too happy. That pregnant pause before she says happy is so perfect. Whereas Gloria Swanson, as great as that performance is, she kind of rushes through some of that ending dialogue
Yeah.
comparatively to what Glenn does,
Yeah.
where Glenn's like really, really making a meal of it. And of course, being like, all you wonderful people out there in the dark, of course, looking at the audience, probably has extra resonance if you're in the theater as she's
Yes.
gazing out at you.
Yes, and there we are, and physically in the dark. It's
Yeah.
yeah, that's one of those scenes where the musical approaches the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were able to successfully make do the same power in musical terms. And boy,
And that final line, of course, which she really lands with a lot of emphasis and with that sense of pride, even where
yes,
she's like, and now, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close up. Which that also has a pause in the middle, too, that Gloria doesn't have.
no,
And that's where, for me, I find it more impactful the way Glenn performs it, to be honest.
she makes it her own, and I agree. I think it's
Yes.
better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
may be that Gloria's one line there has become such a
Yeah.
cliche in a way that to hear it freshly done with another line reading really kind of hits
Yeah.
it home the way that it otherwise wouldn't have. And
I agree. So at least it ends on a strong note, I would say.
yes,
I mean, before we get into more of the details of like maybe the Patti of it all and like the way that the musical was received, did you have any other stray observations just on the show itself?
it's interesting how the show itself now is kind of thought of as a period piece in the sense that until the most recent revival, I think the opulence of the original production has kind of scared away people from performing it in other venues. The songs,
Yeah.
those two songs are taken out, and they are staples of people's cabaret acts. But I think that a lot of younger theater goers don't know the show, at least not until the recent revival of it. And so it's kind of reputation is a bit checkered and distant as opposed to other Lloyd Webber shows that are done much more frequently.
Yeah. Like Cats.
Yes. God, Elvis.
Yeah, but that's right. Well, again getting to my point of it feeling like kind of out of place a little bit, just in the sense of this is in the 90s that this happened, and it does feel like a period piece rather than having the urgency of that 1950 film reflecting current times completely.
Yeah.
Whereas I think maybe this more recent version with Nicole Scherzinger and Tom Francis maybe is much more updated to the times and makes more use of screens and close-ups in a way. I don't know if you want to talk any about that because
Well,
I saw that too.
if for those of you who aren't familiar with this new take on it, it's basically it's a completely stripped down version. There's no fur cuffs in this or turbans. Her Norma is basically a woman in a black slip. And that's the costumes of the entire show. There's a black and white motif, but mostly black, in which all of the players, all the actors on stage have variations on contemporary costumes. So we'll have someone will be wearing a turtleneck, someone some white pants, something like that. But nonetheless, it's a stripped down stage, just a black background, a video camera. Norma's delusions are visualized so that it's the video camera. You see these enormous 20-foot images of what Nicole Scherzinger is doing on the stage at that moment. The songs are all there without the props and costumes and cars and everything. The non-Norma Joe songs are still kind of pretty deadly. But they're very much de-emphasized here. It's the Norma and Joe show, and although the Betty character I think is very very well performed, and the Max character is it still looks like Eric von Stroheim, but nonetheless it's those elements still work to a degree, but it's basically the two actors. Nicole Scherzinger and Tom Francis, who propel it. We had mentioned the Sunset Boulevard number, and I can only talk about the New York production. I think they did something slightly different in London, but the number begins actually like on the third floor of the St. James Theater in the dressing rooms, and the camera follows Tom Francis as he descends the staircase and pokes into the various dressing rooms of various people. And, you'll go into Nicole Scherzinger's dressing room, and there's a picture of her as Norma and the gun. So I was like, okay. And then they'll pass by. Then all of a sudden, they'll come down the stairs, say hello to all the security people and the doormen and some of the people walking by. And they open the door, and all of a sudden, they're on 44th Street. In the middle of, Times Square, New York, and, people walking by and the like, and he does a sort of a promenade up 44th Street into Schubert Alley. And finally, as he sings Sunset Boulevard, and finally at one point pauses in front of a Sunset Boulevard poster with all the reviews on it, and then walks back down, walks back into the orchestra of the St. James and down the aisle and up into the stage. And yes, it's a coup de theatre, but it's also it brings an immediacy to the song, even though that it's taking place in we see New York. There is a vibrancy to it, and it makes it much more contemporary. It brings 2024 cars that are parked on the street into the theater here, by virtue of the video screen, and it's a thrilling piece, and it makes the song come to life in a way that it didn't do in the 1994 production of it. So Scherzinger is not of the delicate singing school of Glenn. She is a belter. But it's a different kind of Norma. It's not a faded Norma quite in the same way that Close was. It's a Norma who's desperately trying to keep up with the times. And Scherzinger's voice is so strong. I think she hits the final "I'll be home at last." When she hits home, and the note she holds a note for about 3 years. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
powerfully so. And it's like,
yeah,
my God, But it's also a declaration of her, Norma, that she still has the strength to do that. So
Mm.
again,
Yeah, that's a good interpretation.
a very different interpretation, and but
Yeah.
absolutely worthy of the Tony Award that she received. It's
Mhm.
really a terrific performance, and I think, ironically, it's going to make the show much more come alive for younger audiences, because this is the kind of
Yeah.
thing that I noticed that when I saw it late in the run, there were, I mean, a lot of people in their 20s and 30s coming to this show in a way that they weren't coming to any of the other shows that I was seeing. So in this sense, it's speaking to a new generation, and that may
Hmm.
speak very well for the eventual reputation reclaiming that the show might have a cause to have.
Yeah. And I think some sort of Broadway traditionalists maybe scoff a little bit at these sort of stripped down Jamie Lloyd productions
Yeah.
that don't have the lavishness of it all. But to your point, it is bringing in younger crowds. It is like the sexier, fresher version of Sunset Boulevard for today's times. That you know, the only thing that I sort of bucked up against is just thinking about how this score is fused into this very fresh contemporary kind of show because of how traditional it sounds.
Yeah.
But it sounds from what you're saying like it still works okay.
Still works okay. The two solos are still so powerful.
Yeah.
There's much less context in terms of old Hollywood. It is mentioned, of course,
Yeah.
but you're not surrounded by Hollywood in this. All of that, the audience, you and the audience are working in your imagination. You are
Right.
picturing all of this, and I think I mean, and in that sense, I think the video works very well in terms of allowing her to perform, to be Norma for now a contemporary video audience.
Right.
They didn't really touch the book. There's no, TikTok references or anything like that in it. It is, but you get the connection by the
Hmm.
use of the cameras. You're right about Jamie Lloyd's productions. They are not for everybody. I guess he currently has Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter in a tunnel in Waiting for Godot on Broadway currently. So I
Yeah.
didn't see that. But here, just the bare stage and the use of the street really kind of makes the context much more immediate. And I think it will make Sunset right now. Sunset Boulevard in many theater goers' minds is a hit, which it
Hmm.
never really was critically for the 1993-94 production.
Yeah. Or financially, for that
Yeah,
matter.
it's
But
for
we'll
many
talk about it.
reasons, including the lawsuits, which we will get to.
Yes. Yes.
It is notable that the lawsuits contributed to Sunset Boulevard, setting the record for the most money lost by a theatrical endeavor in the history of the United States.
Hell yeah.
So,
Well done, Andrew Lloyd
yeah.
Webber. But yes. Well, to that, I love all that insight. Thank you for sharing that because I had not seen that version either. But, I sort of wanted to, but I felt like I should probably hold off until I see this Glenn version.
Yes.
Not that I can even see the Nicole version now because it's gone, but
Well, perhaps the
we'll see.
library will have it too.
Maybe the library, I'll take a little visit
Yeah.
whenever they have that, if they have that. Anyway, to speak to more extra textual stuff
Yes.
as we're in this section here, let's get into the Patti LuPone of it all. So, as I discussed at the beginning, she originated the role on the West End stage, and she was apparently offered a deal to do London and then transfer to Broadway. But then there was a wrinkle, of course, of how they wanted to do Los Angeles for the American premiere, which Patti was not offered, and she felt a certain way about another actress debuting the role in America. For Andrew Lloyd Webber, apparently he just wanted kind of a bigger sort of movie star with name recognition to do the role in Los Angeles. I think kind of feeling like it would be appropriate given the setting. So yeah, Glenn proved to be a big hit in the fall of '93, which persuaded Andrew and company to have her transferred over to Broadway. And so Patti was kind of skeptical of Glenn even being cast in the role in the first place. There is a report of something she said about Glenn, which Patti has disputed, but it does add to the lore here, where she is reported as saying, Glenn Close, she brays like a donkey and her nickname is George Washington because if you look at her in profile, her nose meets her chin. Patti.
Pot kettle. Really?
I mean, let's talk about that. Yeah, very classy from Patti. If she did say that. Like I said, she denies saying that, but that was the recollection of Edgar Dobie, who was part of Andrew's operation in the U.S., and he was tasked with breaking the news to her, and that was her response, allegedly.
Yeah, this was a scandal at the time.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure watching it, you were like, oh my God.
Oh my God, Patty's at it again.
Yeah.
I can only say that I know people who have worked with Patti, and it's not always the easiest time, which is not to say that it wasn't that way in the London cast. But whether that had anything to do with Patti had anything to do with that, it may be that Lloyd Webber saw that Glenn got better reviews. And the London reviews, if the London show was going to be taken en masse to Broadway, he knew that it was going to get the same kind of reviews, if not worse. And it's, in a way, it was a financial decision. Ironically, though, it wound up costing him more than it would have otherwise, because Patti claimed, and apparently the judgment seemed to indicate, that she had an ironclad contract to go to Broadway, that it was more than a mere verbal promise from Lloyd Webber, and took it to court and won, or at least they agreed to a settlement, shall we say.
Right.
And
exactly.
A not inconsiderable settlement.
Mm-hmm. Did she say she could pay for her swimming pool in Connecticut or something?
Yes.
For that? Yeah.
And apparently it's still a very sore subject, because when she was making the rounds of Broadway, most recently when she was in the play called The Roommate with Mia Farrow, Sunset Boulevard was about to open, and eventually she did see Nicole and apparently praised Nicole's performance very much. So it's, you take that for what it's worth, but it still seems to gnaw at the Patti, and as it happens, Patti, I guess, has grudges.
Yes. We know this, certainly.
But it was very costly to the show.
No, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, again, Patti felt betrayed. She was furious. I mean, that she has not disputed at all. Like she said, she threw a floor lamp out the window when she heard.
I can't imagine.
Yes, right. But yeah, she has really maintained that feud with Andrew Lloyd Webber for decades now.
Yeah.
Which I get. Again, it was a betrayal. The thing that gets me, though, is that light shade she's thrown at Glenn at times, which bothers me personally. Like, I know she doesn't blame her for the decision, per se, but even as recently as this year, 2025, she said that they were seated next to each other at an event in 2011, and I guess Patti says Glenn said to her, I had nothing to do with it, regarding her replacing Patti.
Yeah.
And then Patti said, or she wanted to say, bullshit, bitch. So I know people are like, yes, funny, diva, slay, all this, whatever people say about Patti.
Yeah.
But that part of it is just really tacky to me.
Yes.
And at a certain point, it's just like, you just have to move on or it'll fester, and which it clearly has.
And it put a cloud over the show.
Yeah.
It very often that feud has been brought up in terms of evaluating the show, and it's and that's a shame. The show should be evaluated on its own. But that's not the only lawsuit involving Sunset Boulevard.
Thank you for teeing that up.
Yes, this involves Glenn's production in Los Angeles because she had contracted for a certain period of time, and they were looking for a replacement, and they found one, one might argue a star whose glory days were kind of growing behind her. Faye Dunaway was about to
Yep.
take over the role. And you think about Dunaway's career at that time, and Norm is a perfect role on paper for her. She is
Yep.
clearly a movie star, one of our big movie stars in the last half century. And for whatever reasons, her career had dimmed a bit at that time, and this was looked like a perfect marriage of actor and role. But there was only one problem. She couldn't sing the part. And
Right.
with, to be fair, it's a very difficult score, and you really do need an actor with significant singing chops to be able to handle it. And 2 weeks, I believe, before opening, they not only fired her, but they closed the production completely. They said, we're ending it, in 2 weeks. And it was kind of another scandal. Dunaway, of course, is an actor like LuPone who can bear grudges very much. But also it did cost the city of Los Angeles a lot, at least the businesses around the area in Century City that were booming in restaurant business because Sunset Boulevard was drawing so many people in the neighborhood. And they had counted on it this was a theater that would run shows for like a year and a half. And those people were counting on the income from the next Norma Desmond. And Faye Dunaway promised great bounty. And the fact that they would rather close the show than to continue on without a star of that kind of caliber really was a major shock in the Los Angeles theater scene. Dunaway, of course, sued. I don't.
With the encouragement of Patti, by the way. She was just like, go for it, babe.
Yeah, in terms of damaging her reputation and having the explanation be basically that she doesn't have a good voice. There are some grounds for that. And like Patti's case, this was settled for a very not insignificant sum and helped to just drive the show into further debt. And so it was quite and that actually was about the beginning of the end of the Schubert Theater because then it became kind of tainted with this cloud. A few years later, they did not get the expected production of The Lion King there, and they wound up that they expected to run for years, and it went to the Pantages downtown, and then after that, it got fewer and fewer bookings until finally they demolished the theater, and so it was a bit of a cultural moment in Los Angeles, and now you have a show that has two significant lawsuits strapped against it. Plus the fact that
Yeah.
really so expensive to run that even at its peak it wasn't making money hand over fist. It was doing very well in New York, and then subsequent Normas were brought in New York, and Betty Buckley, I understand, was absolutely terrifying in the part, and I could see that she's there's a
Yep.
there's a piercing quality to her voice that I could see really kind of scaring you. And but it wound up eventually losing money. And I think some people think of it as a flop, and technically it is. But it's a show that has so many qualities to it, and so many of the qualities are associated with the performance of Glenn Close.
Yeah. Agreed. Also, just one other thing. I don't know if you mentioned, but Faye held a press conference. I think that's a good detail in this,
That's
where she called Andrew Lloyd Webber a capricious man. So
Yeah.
There's just, I mean, there is a kind of meta irony going on here of like these divas who, are wanting this big thing for them and then they are being rejected in these ways. That is reminiscent of Norma Desmond. So
Very,
like I don't know, there's something going on there.
very thematically consistent.
Yeah. Also, not for nothing, but like even Glenn had her own issues on Broadway too. I don't know if you know this part too, but just of like, it was a hit, but then when Glenn took like this 2 week break, her understudy, Karen Mason, came on, and it was reported that the grosses were basically the same as when Glenn was in the role at that time. But this had turned out to be kind of like this inflated statement from one of the producers
Yeah.
because the tickets were discounted
Yeah.
when the understudy was there. And so that kind of juiced the numbers. So it became a big news story. And then Glenn was furious that there was this suggestion that her contributions were basically like interchangeable with her no name understudy, for lack of a better word. So she wrote a letter to Andrew and she said it sickened her to be treated with such disregard. And that was published in Variety.
Oh,
And
oh.
Glenn was mortified and it was a big mess. So that's rough. Big headache from all angles, really, for Andrew.
I love when we get a chance to talk about really messy productions on this show.
Yep, I know, right? And this is one of the messiest. But yeah, it kept going until 97 on Broadway. It did 997 performances in total, just three short of 1,000. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, it was described as at the time as the ultimate hit flop
Yeah, yes.
because it ran for years, but it just was hemorrhaging money. But, having said that, it did well at the Tonys. Granted, it was a super weak year for original new musicals
Yes.
on Broadway. It was just Sunset and this other musical, Smokey Joe's Cafe. It kind of lucked out,
Yeah.
but it got 11 nominations and won 7, including Best Musical and Best Lead Actress in a Musical for Glenn, her third Tony. Very exciting. And so, I mean, the only other nominee in that category was Rebecca Luker for the revival of Showboat, but not much competition there, even though I do think even if she was in a stronger year, she probably would have had a good chance of winning either way. So don't know if the show would have won in a stronger year, but certainly the actress, whoever's in that role, I think is always going to be a front runner.
Yeah, and so the show is a Tony-winning Best Musical, and it will always have that cachet to it. But
Yeah.
but Glenn with 3 Tony Awards is really one of the great Tony winners of all time, and based on what I've seen of her on stage, much deserved.
Yes. And she did, of course, revive her role as Norma in 2017. And, to very good reviews as well. She wasn't eligible at the time because she'd already done it, but I imagine she probably would have gotten another nomination for that. But I did also just want to note she has been trying to adapt this movie for herself in the lead role for several years now. I know there's been some kind of snickering lately about how like she's now 78 years old and the character of Norma Desmond is supposed to be 50. I don't know if it's going to happen, to be honest, just because like we got the classical, Hollywood ageism always coming into play. And this isn't really a beloved musical, even though it does have some new cachet now with the new one. What do you think? Is this ever getting made?
If it's going to be made the Glenn way, I think it would be prohibitively costly.
Yeah.
To do what the film equivalent of what they did on stage in the original production would be with the furs and the sets and the cars and all of that. It would be a lot of money to put on. And I think the nature of the movie audience has changed. Older audiences have not returned quite the way other audiences have post-COVID. And
Yeah.
I would think that it would be older audiences and gay men would be the only real audience for this. I can't imagine young people coming to a Glenn Close version of Sunset Boulevard. Sorry to say.
Wow.
They might with Scherzinger, and I have been hearing a few rumblings that there's been talk with Scherzinger about doing a film version of the revival, although I'm
Mm,
not quite sure how that would work given the minimalist style
right.
of the stage production there, how that could carry over into film and be a satisfying movie. But I mean, that's the challenge that this production has. I mean, granted, some actors, female actors, are working well into their 60s and 70s, but not many. Glenn
Hmm.
is one of the major survivors,
Yep, yep.
so that resonance may still be there. Even though, it's perhaps Glenn Close at 78 might be in the same spot that Norma Desmond might have been at 50. In that
Hmm.
sense, it may have changed a bit, but I'm not quite sure the audience is there for an old-fashioned kind of musical like that that would probably have to cost a lot of money. But that's just a guess. God love her for trying though. And
Yeah.
it just is so wonderful to see her keep working, and again being rumbled about the awards conversation for this year for supporting actress.
I know. Yeah, she is one of the lucky ones. She is not a Norma Desmond herself, even though she plays her very well. But look, it took her a long time to make Albert Nobbs. It took decades, so I don't know. I hope maybe she can get it done somehow. I don't know what some combination of gay men need to get together and give her the
Yes.
money and she can do it herself. I don't know.
Get some Netflix money, please.
Look, she has been working hard for Netflix in recent
You
years. So like
really.
what she went through with the Deliverance,
Oh no,
she deserves her blank check for Sunset
he
Boulevard.
does. Get that Padum and a Sunset Boulevard movie up, please.
Yes. But let's get to our last segment where we're going to rate Glenn's performance on a very specific scale. Thinking about her performance and where this sits in her career, would you say that her performance as Norma Desmond is such that she is appropriately ready for her close up? Is it low Glenergy or somewhere in the middle, close but no cigar?
Definitely not low energy. And what she does in
Okay.
this, up and down the stairs and emoting, and no, not low energy. Um,
Low Glenergy.
Low energy, yes.
Excuse me.
But what she did to elevate the material, I don't think can be considered somewhere in the middle. She takes this baby on her shoulders and she carries it up that staircase. And what this show is largely because of her. And I think that it is really, she is ready for her close up and then some.
Amen. Yeah, for me, this is one of the most slam dunk ready for her close ups. It is right in the name.
Yep.
That's what this is named after. So she owns this role. She always will. Her and Gloria Swanson will forever co own this role in my eyes.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm just thrilled for her that she got this opportunity to show yet another side of her talent. So there you have it. That's Sunset Boulevard. Tom, I feel like this was such a thorough examination of all of the crazy legacy of this show. And I couldn't have been more happy to have you on as my partner in this.
Oh,
So thank you so much.
thank you, Kevin. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And this one was particularly fun. So thanks for asking me to come on board.
Of course. Well, where can people find more of you on the internet?
You can find me writing as a contributing writer on Gold Derby, and I am mostly found on at Next Best Picture podcasts, reviews. I'm right now sending out my New York Film Festival reviews out there, and you can find me on Twitter at Thomas E. O'Brien.
Yes. Very good. All right. Thank you all so much for listening. You can find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter and Instagram, just Kevin Jacobsen, no underscore on Blue Sky. You can also listen to my Oscar-themed podcast, And the Runner-Up Is, for coverage of every single Best Actress race. You can also join my Patreon, where you can hear a whole lot more of Tom O'Brien here, covering several crazy-ass Oscar races of the past. For How Did They Win? And to keep up with The World According to Glenn on social, follow The Glenn Pod, and rate, review, and follow on all podcast platforms. And with that, I will bid you all adieu.